I believe we are live. Welcome, friends. Welcome to this wonderful event. My name is Annie. I'm going to be your hostess, and I am here with Catarina Rivera. And this is all about using accessibility to expand your reach. So, I've got a few wonderful updates before we get started, and then I'm going to turn it over to Catarina. So, let's get to it. Let me get to the right screen. Here we are. Okay, so about your presenter. This is Catarina. She is a public speaker and DEI consultant. She is the founder of Blindish Latina. She works tirelessly to improve accessibility and inclusion. She is smashing disability stigmas through storytelling and advocacy, and she is also a certified professional in accessibility core competencies. And she has so much more to share. And so let's get social. If you are watching this and want to take photos, tag us on Facebook or Instagram. Make sure that you connect with Catarina when this is over. All of her information is here. You can find her Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter. She has an incredible TEDx talk. Be sure to watch that. And then at her website, catarinarivera.com. So tag us on social. We want to hear from you, see what you get out of this presentation. Yep, let's connect there. Sorry, this formatting is a little funky. So need to know things. So check the websites for events near you. We have a ton of new wonderful chapters that have started. And so there are going to be a lot of in-person events happening. And if you would like to be a part of the volunteer squad, doing things like this, hosting events and getting some perks, you can sign up to volunteer at sheiswonderful.com/volunteer. And upcoming events. So July 22nd, Wonderful is teaming up with Brave New Art for a social change Q&A. That's going to be a really fascinating conversation. So we would love to see you there. July 26th, Appropriation or Appreciation, How to be Fashionably Responsible. So, and I couldn't spell fashionably, my apologies. But this is going to be a really interesting conversation too about cultural appropriation when it comes to fashion. And then, of course, we have the Women in Travel Summit happening in Gdansk, Poland in October. That's going to be amazing. I am hoping to be there. So be sure, if you do not already have tickets, get those. And every month, a portion of your wonderful membership goes to support an amazing travel organization. And so this month's beneficiary is Rise Travel Institute. You can learn more about them and the incredible work that they do at risetravelinstitute.org, and check out their Instagram, follow them there at Rise Travel Institute. And just so you know, for every paid membership, Wonderful gives a scholarship to a woman in need who can't afford to be, to pay the membership dues. So if you know someone who would love to be a part of Wonderful, but could use a scholarship, you can submit an application, sheiswonderful.com/scholarships. The next application deadline is December 1st. And always a shout out to our brand sponsors. Thank you so much. We couldn't do these events without you. We appreciate you supporting women traveling and making travel better for all women. So big thanks to our brand partners. And now for our feature presentation. So I am going to stop sharing my slides and get Catarina's on here. All right, Catarina, take it away.
Thank you so much. It's lovely to be here with you, Annie, and of course, all of you. Thank you for coming. We're going to be talking about how to use accessibility to expand your reach. I'm just making sure that I can navigate the slides. Let's see. No, that doesn't work.
I know it's a little tricky, so
how do you advance the slides?
I had to do mine in a different way. Oh, if you hover, it looks like if you hover over the screen that you're seeing.
Okay, it just popped up.
There we go. Okay, great. We got it. No worries.
All right. So What are you going to learn today? First, we're going to start with some key disability awareness principles. That's the most important place to start with the awareness. Then we'll go into why accessibility matters, and I will share some easy ways that you can boost accessibility and expand your reach. We will have a little bit of time for questions at the end as well, and Annie's going to help monitor all the comments that you will be sharing. I invite all of you to be present. It is a busy world. You might be traveling right now, and whatever you need to do to be present in this space, if you need something to drink, if you need to get up, whatever it is, like I might need to blow my nose or drink water. Let's all do whatever we need to be present in this space. So who am I? I'm giving a quick visual description. I am a Latina woman with an orange sweater. I'm wearing glasses with a dark brown frame, and my hair is pulled back in a bun and it's dark brown. And behind me is a white wall in a living room with different plants and furniture. I'm very expressive. I talk a lot with my hands and I smile often. My pronouns are she, her, Ada. And for the land acknowledgement, this presentation was created on the traditional stolen lands of the Piscataway and Akanchak or Anacostan people. And one thing I always share is that my perspective is my perspective alone. I don't represent all disabled people. I don't represent all Latina people, all women. It would be completely impossible to do that. Excuse me. So a little bit more about who I am. I am a disabled public speaker, DEI consultant, and content creator. I've been disabled my whole life with being hard of hearing, so I wear hearing aids. I'm showing my hearing aids. I also have a condition called Usher syndrome that makes me lose my vision over time. So the vision that I have right now is very limited. It's about in this small box. So I used my usable vision and a white cane to navigate the world. And so here's a picture of me with my cane. In terms of other things that you might want to know about me, I travel full time. So that's one of my passions, and that's one of the reasons I linked up with Wonderful to continue to spread the message that disabled people travel. We want to have these experiences, and unfortunately, travel experiences and content are not always accessible for us. So I'm hoping to do my part to improve awareness. So did you know 1 in 4 adults in the United States are disabled? I believe this number to be an undercount. I think the actual number is higher. So just know there's a lot of disabled people in the country and in the world. Over 1 billion people are disabled worldwide. 46% of people aged 60 or over are disabled worldwide. And what this really means is that as we age, disability just becomes a part of life. 30% of college-educated employees aged 21 to 65 are disabled, and these are in white-collar roles. So there are a lot of disabled people in the workforce. We also have to remember intersectionality. Disability is truly intersectional because anyone can become disabled or be disabled at any time. This is very important to recognize. So any other identity that people hold, disability can intersect with that, whether that's religion, race, ethnicity, language, veteran status, socioeconomic history, family structure, any kind of identity that you hold, disability could be a part of your life as well. Disabled people are the largest minority group, and I'm looking for a term that is more comfortable for me than minority group, but that's what I have right now. Disability is a part of the natural diversity of humankind. And this is something that I say in my TEDx. We really need to do a better job of destigmatizing disability, because I think people often have this idea that disabled people are not in society, are difficult to access, and we're really your neighbor, your friend, your family member. We're all around and we're already present in your life. And being disabled is just a part of being human. It's just part of diversity that humans hold. So what is a disability? According to the CDC, a disability is any condition of the body or mind, an impairment that makes it more difficult for the person with the condition to do certain activities or an activity limitation and interact with the world around them. A participation restriction. The ADA, the Americans with Disabilities Act, has a narrower definition of disability because it's concerned with who is eligible for benefits. And this definition says physical or mental impairment that substantially limits one or more major life activities. So let's make that more understandable. We'll go into now the models of disability. A model is like a philosophy, a worldview, a way of thinking about disability. The medical model is very prominent. Many people enter the disability club through the medical model because they get some kind of diagnosis. And the medical model says that the medical community has all the value. They have the solutions, the knowledge. They are the experts. And disabled people are people that need to be fixed. It's also really highly focused on individual disabled people as individual cases to work on. It does not concern itself with living with disability, living well, or anything beyond the medical context. The charity model is another very prominent model when it comes to disability. And if you think of a telethon or fundraising appeal that you may have received, you may have already seen this narrative where disabled people are portrayed as objects to be pitied, people that don't have full, rich, dynamic lives, but people that we should feel sorry for and raise money for some kind of cure, treatment, solution because their lives are just terrible. And there's a lot of negativity about the disability experience that comes through when we talk about the charity model. And the people doing the charity work are positioned as saviors, as the amazing, good-hearted people that are saving the poor, disabled people. So both of these models are pretty harmful for the disability community. Let's talk now about the social model. The social model is super empowering. I mean, we have to have one that's good, right? That's positive. The social model basically says that there's nothing wrong with disabled people. What's wrong are the barriers in society, the accessibility barriers. So with my current level of vision, what's often difficult for me are things like not having a ramp in terms of being able to enter a space, or when I'm in a dark restaurant that I can't read lips, I can't see the people around me. So now I have reduced comprehension and a feeling of belonging in that space. But imagine if those spaces were designed to be accessible with better lighting, with more ease of access, then my disability wouldn't be as much of an issue. And the barriers are really about what's going on in our world. And so the social model really puts the onus of responsibility on the world and on systems and society to create greater inclusion and accessibility. It's also really about connecting disabled people together and having that strong community. So it's very empowering. Now let's go into types of disabilities. Remember that disabilities can be permanent, temporary, situational, or undiagnosed. A temporary disability is like breaking an arm or a leg. Permanent is like Usher syndrome, like what I have. Situational is an example of that is if you go to a restaurant where you can't hear your friend that is sitting across from you, the tools that help me as a hard of hearing person, like an app that would transcribe your conversation, would help you in that scenario. But once you're out of that situation, you don't have a need for it anymore. Then undiagnosed, this is really important to remember. There are many disabled people that don't have an official diagnosis. And there are so many reasons for this. They may not have been able to access quality health care, or it's too expensive, or whatnot, or the criteria, the diagnostic criteria, are biased in themselves. So the person has not been able to access a diagnosis due to that bias. Then you also truly have people that do not know that they have a disability. And this can happen for many different kinds of conditions. I have a friend that was diagnosed with ADHD at 29. She always had it. But being a woman with ADHD, you're much less likely to get diagnosed at a young age. A disability can be acquired or from birth, and you can have multiple disabilities as well. Here's one categorization of disability that I find helpful: mental health, physical, hearing, visual, learning, cognitive, developmental. There's so many different categories, and it's important to keep that in mind when we think of disability. Another thing here I share is able-bodied versus non-disabled. A lot of people use the term able-bodied to describe someone who doesn't have a disability. I prefer the term non-disabled because there's so many disabilities that do not center on the body. So I find non-disabled to be more inclusive and more descriptive. So now I'd love to hear from you in the chat, wherever you are. What are some different examples of disabilities? Look at the categories and see what types of disabilities you can share. So I'm hopeful that we can have some participation. I'm not sure with this platform how it will work. So I'll be watching the comments and see if we get any participation here. Okay, let's see. Okay, thank you, Annie, for sharing a diagnosis with ADHD at 40. So many things made sense after that. Thank you. There are so many people that can resonate with stories like that. Okay, we have PTSD. Yes, that is a disability. There are a lot of mental health conditions that people need to know about. Okay, I'm going to keep going because people might be on delay, but thank you for those contributions. Some other examples are dyslexia, dyscalculia. Okay, sensory integration dysfunction. Thank you. Okay, Usher syndrome. Okay, thank you for sharing dyslexia. We have physical, neurological, emotional disabilities. Okay, thank you for sharing your story here, Olivia. Sharing that a diagnosis of autism was not pursued because the psychologist said it was not worth the time and money unless it affected their employment. So that would be like an unofficial kind of diagnosis in that way. Thank you for sharing that. Mental, emotional illness. I don't know if this is pronounced Angelman or Engelman syndrome. I appreciate the contribution. Challenges with learning, hearing, speaking, understanding, communicating. Yes, and there are many disabilities that would relate to that. So thank you so much for participating. We're going to continue on. So remember, disabilities are not always apparent or visible. You cannot look at someone and know whether they have a disability. Even though I have a physical disability, when I go out into the world, if I'm not using my cane, people generally assume that I don't have a disability. Even if I bump into something, they're going to assume, oh, she's rude, she's not paying attention. Because we often forget that we don't truly know what's going on with every person around us. Self-identification. This is about language used to describe someone who is disabled. There is person-first language that emphasizes personhood by saying person with a disability. And then we have identity-first language, disabled person. Both of these are respectful ways to describe disabled people. And there is historical context as to why people have preferred one over the other. In the earlier decades of the disability rights movement, so 50s, 60s, 70s, there was a real need to emphasize personhood because disabled people were institutionalized in many cases. Parents were told their children would not have good futures. There was a lot of negativity around disabled people, and we were kept out of society. We were not allowed to attend school. There was not adequate education. So when it comes to the disability rights movement, emphasizing personhood made so much sense. And that's where person-first language was the preference, person with a disability. Now, in today's society, there is a growing movement among disability advocates who prefer identity-first language, and I am one of them, where I'm really proud of my identity. It feels much more direct to just say disabled person. And so this is the one that I prefer. Both of them are respectful. There are some other terms that I definitely advise against. We have euphemisms for disability like handicapable and differently able. There are a lot of non-disabled people who don't want to say the word disabled because they're not realizing that desire comes from this feeling that disability is bad. So they want to make it sound better in some way, cuter. And this desire arises from non-disabled people. So these terms don't come from the community. And it's very important to just say the word and recognize that disability is not a bad word. Then we have crippled, handicapped, impaired. These are words that were very common in the past and today are seen as offensive and outdated. I will note that the disability community has reclaimed some of these terms, and that's so important to acknowledge and respect. It is up to them or to our community to reclaim these terms. If you're non-disabled, you should not be using them. And then we have special needs. Special needs is very popular and it's commonly used, but our needs are not special. That's the easiest way that I can say why I don't like this term. Everyone in the world has needs, and disabled people have needs too, but our needs are not special or different. Always respect self-identification. I've just given you that list, and I meet disabled people who tell me that they are differently able. And it's not my place to tell them how to identify. Everyone's on their own journey with language. So if you encounter a disabled person, however they self-identify, that's what you need to use when you're talking to them. Let's talk a little bit about ableism. So how does ableism show up? Ableism is the idea that non-disabled people are more worthy or valuable than disabled people. This leads to discrimination, prejudice, bias is a very harmful ism. And with disabled people, we grow up in the same society as everyone else. We internalize these messages, and that leads to internalized ableism, where we ourselves are concerned about being burdens for non-disabled people. That's a really big one that a lot of people encounter when they're contending with disability, feeling like a burden. So let's make this more concrete. What are some examples of ableism and how it's in our world? So, for example, it's ableist that there's no airplane designed where wheelchair users can stay in their wheelchairs. That's completely ableist. The regular use of phrases like falls on deaf ears, crazy, otherwise insane, lame, blind spot, tone deaf. There are so many words and phrases that what they're doing is using disability to say something negative. Usually it's something about, falls on deaf ears about missing information or being ignorant. You can use precise language to describe what you actually mean instead of relying on ableist phrases. Shadow banning of disabled creators. This happens often on social media, and it's very troubling to see that creators' content can be suppressed and hidden from the app's community or the social media platform's community because of what they're saying. TikTok had a particular case of this where they were basically, devaluing disabled content creators because their look didn't fit the way the app wanted their users' face to look. So this is really disheartening to see, and it's completely ableist. Lack of representation in magazines, media, TV. If you're non-disabled, you can assume your experience will be represented. If you're disabled, you cannot assume that you're going to see representation of yourself in rich, respectful narratives in magazines, media, TV. Online course videos without captions. This is another example of ableism where people are creating videos all the time and not really understanding that they are being exclusionary if they do not include captions. Then Instagram posts without image descriptions are also exclusionary because people, or alt text, and we'll talk about these techniques later as far as what they are. But All of this really prioritizes the non-disabled experience. So if you have any other examples of ableism, feel free to add them into the comments. So I'm going to continue because I think that I have a lot of slides, but I'm going to keep looking at the comments to see if we have any examples of ableism that do come through. So let's talk about accessibility and why it matters. Accessibility means that people are able to participate, to be a part of everything without their disability excluding them. And accessibility, what accessibility is, changes depending on the situation. It could depend on what tools are being used, the abilities, the type of situation. And for digital accessibility, unfortunately, a lot of times you're limited by how accessible a platform you are on is designed to be. And that is difficult as an individual user. So if your platform is not set up in a way that you can add captions, that can be difficult. For example, Instagram Live does not have captions. There's no way. And I know my friends have tried. My people who are really well versed in accessibility have tried to find a workaround, and we have not found one yet. Remember that accessibility benefits everyone. This is so important to recognize, like why we should be working on it. And one of the great benefits of it is that you think you're designing for one group, maybe like one type of disabled person, but actually the benefits extend to everyone. Let's give the classic example of this, which is curb cuts. Curb cuts were designed for wheelchair users, but everyone is using them in the sidewalk. This includes people who are pushing strollers, pulling packages on a cart, elderly people who want to be safer as you're walking around, blind people. We love a curb cut. And so it's really out there making the sidewalk safer for all pedestrians. Now we're going to go more deeply into a case study of accessibility. And what we're going to talk about is closed captions. Then I'm going to give you more information about different techniques as well. Did you know that 83% of content in the US is viewed with the sound off? I think that's a very powerful piece of information. 80% of people are more likely to finish watching a video when it has captions. And we all know how important it is, that statistic of who has finished. What percentage of your videos are people watching? Captions improve comprehension of your video content. It helps people to understand what you are saying. Captions support auditory processing and can be helpful when there are distractions. So there are people with auditory processing disorder who say that captions are very beneficial for them. I've also heard the same from people with ADHD and who are autistic. And I know that when you get information in more than one way, it's just helpful. Maybe someone is tired or distracted that day, they can benefit as well. Captions help those who speak English as a second language. Think about how hard it is to learn a new language and how much work you're doing to listen and interpret sounds. So having the captions available to read can really support someone who is still working on perfecting their English. Now you'll notice my last example here is people who are hard of hearing or deaf. So over 460 million people worldwide are hard of hearing. Captions make your content accessible to them or to us, because I'm in that group. But a lot of times people think captions are only for the deaf and hard of hearing. So I hope now you're seeing that it's really such a wide group of people that benefit. and it's really everyone. Captions can be used to create video transcripts. And usually how this works is if you have a video and you run it through a tool like Descript or Capwing, you are then going to get a file with the captions that then is an SRT file with the time allotted to there. You can remove the timestamps and use that as the basis for your transcript. These transcripts can boost your SEO rankings, which are so important for your content being seen, because now you've made it easier for the search engines to find out what your content is about. You've turned the video into words. And while they're getting better at ranking videos, text right now is still the most important way of them understanding your content. The bottom line is you can reach a much larger audience with closed captions on your content. So accessibility in a summary. You don't need to know what your audience needs. You don't know what your audience needs until they tell you. But remember that you might never find out. There are many people that are not disclosing their disability, and that is totally okay. It took me a long time to get comfortable and confident in my disability. I've been on this journey for a while, but there were times in my 20s that I was really focused on hiding, not talking about it, and just doing anything I can for people not to find out that I had a disability. So you're not going to know what's going on with everyone in your audience, but accessible practices build trust. Showing your audience that you care about accessibility and you're trying, even if you don't get it right in the beginning, just get started. You will build greater trust. It feels good to be included. Think about those times when you've been excluded, when you've had an experience where it was really hard for you but easy for everyone else. That's not a good feeling. You don't want your community members and your audience to feel that way. And the bonus is that it's good for business. I never lead with the business summary because this is truly the right thing to do. We deserve to be included. We deserve full human rights as disabled people. But I think it's important to acknowledge that it will have a positive impact on your business, but that's not the reason that we should be doing all of this. So now I'm going to give you an example of how I made this more accessible. So on this slide, I had all this text, and you'll notice all the text was on the left. It's kind of hard to read. It is small. This is my old slide. So after you've gotten a sense of how this slide presents information, I want to show you now my new slide. And let's see if you think this is easier to understand. Okay, yes, this is my new slide. And on this slide, I have different boxes with less text. There's more white space. It's more evenly distributed. So I hope this is an example of how accessibility is not just about technical things, captions, alt text. It's also about how do you show your information? How do you make language simple and easy to read? That's also accessibility. We have people with learning disabilities. So these are the best practices that I share in my free ebook on how to use accessibility to expand your reach. We'll talk briefly about some of these strategies. So we have color contrast. Color contrast, it's all about making sure that people can read your content. So this slide has a white background and then it has black text with some of the links in blue. That is going to be high color contrast and easy to read. But if this text that was in the boxes was like a sky blue or very light blue, that would be hard for many people to read. So color contrast is really important to pay attention to. We talked about transcripts. So that is really amazing and wonderful to see when people like podcast creators have transcripts for their content. It makes their content easier to understand for everyone, because now people have a choice. They can read or they can listen. And this helps me as a hard of hearing person, and it helps a whole host of other kinds of people. Then we have labeling buttons. I'm in the top row on the third box from the left. Labeling buttons is really important when you're designing a website, because when people are using your screen readers to access your website, everything is going to be read aloud to them. So if you have a button that doesn't have an appropriate label on it, you're not giving the screen reader any information that they can understand. And that will not help the user be able to navigate your website. Closed captioning for online meetings. This is incredibly important. Any online event or meeting that you have should have closed captions. And I know we are streaming to LinkedIn. LinkedIn has automatic closed captions that are pretty good on any live event. So that's awesome. And this is important to see embedded into any platform. Let's talk now about font selection. I'm in the middle row on the left, and fonts are all about making sure they're readable. I know that we see really pretty script fonts that look like handwriting, that have all kinds of curly elements, and those can be very difficult to read. They can be pretty, but I don't believe that you have to lose beauty when you focus on accessibility. There are some really nice looking fonts that just are cleaner and present in a way that's more readable for people. So think about that with your font selection. Now here we have image description followed by alt text. And I made these clickable, but I think that the way that I'm sharing the slides here, we're not going to be able to kind of interact with these elements. But what I will say is that I have tons of content on Instagram that talks about different digital accessibility practices. And of course, the free ebook, which you'll see the link. And that is one thing you can download, where I explain everything very simply, and I include links to resources for each best practice. So image descriptions describe the image, and they are accessible to everyone. And on Instagram, they would be in the caption, for example. On LinkedIn, they would be in the post. Alt text on images is behind, it's like in the back end. So there's a box that you would fill in for alt text, and that is only accessible to screen readers. Alt text is also usually shorter and briefer. And what both of them do is turn images into words. They describe what's in a picture or what's in a video. I love to do video descriptions of my reels because I want everyone to know what's happening in there. So this makes your content accessible for people who are blind. The next thing here, learn best practices. I just want everyone to keep learning. So that in itself is a way to be accessible, to keep learning. We already talked about closed captions on videos that you produce. Audio descriptions were mentioned in the chat here. This is also a really great best practice for accessibility. And if you want to see how audio description works, you can turn this on Netflix when you're watching a movie, and you can see or hear how it works. It will describe what is on the screen. This is really wonderful and inclusive for blind people. The next thing here is use diverse images. And what I'm really talking about here in the ebook is about presenting different types of disability and different types of disabled people in your images. So if you are producing a brochure about a travel experience and I don't see myself in there, I'm going to feel like that experience is not for me. And so when you talk about, your decisions for who you're going to feature, what images you're going to use, please consider including images of different types of disabled people as well, so that you can communicate you thought about us. And the very last best practice here is always ask your community. Engage in that dialogue, learn about them, so you can provide greater accessibility and kind of figure out what's important to tackle first. That's something you can glean from talking to your community. And it also really depends on how you're showing up as a creator. Where are you producing? So if you're producing a lot of videos, then you have certain techniques, closed captions, video description, that are going to be more salient towards what you are doing. But if you're doing a podcast, then I would say focus on your transcripts, focus on your web design. Are you being accessible there? So what do I challenge you to do now? I challenge you to make a commitment. Say, I'm committed to improving accessibility. I'm committed to learning. And pick one thing that you will learn how to do and implement this week. Track a related metric. What we track is what we focus on. So include it. And here is a link where you can download my free ebook at catarinarivera.com/free ebook. And this is the resource that has everything contained within that table, along with the links on how you, for example, a color contrast checker that you can use, or tools that you can use to generate captions. Everything that you need in order to make accessibility something that you're getting started on. So thank you again for spending this time with me. I hope to stay connected with you. I'm on Instagram at blindishlatina, and I'm on LinkedIn. And today, actually, I was just named one of LinkedIn's top 12 voices on disability advocacy, which is incredible. And I'm so honored. I love what this platform is doing as well. So thank you so much for being here with me. And I want to apologize because I think that usually when I do a presentation, I'm very, very attentive to captions. And I think today I could have done more to liaise with the team here because I'm not sure if the captions were showing up properly on all the platforms that we are streaming to. So now we have time, about, I think, 12 minutes for your questions and comments, and then we will go to the final slides from Wonderful.
Oh my gosh, this was so, I learned so much. And thank you for all of this. And congratulations on that, nomination from LinkedIn. That's super exciting.
Thank you, Annie.
Okay, so I am going to remove your slides just so we can see you. And I do have some questions that have come through. One of them, so when you were talking about different kinds of disabilities, there was a question about what do you call a disability that affects like many of those categories? For example, like a disability pride flag breaks them into different, like breaks them apart, but like one disease, somebody mentioned like a migraine can affect many of those different areas. Is there a name for that?
Okay, well, I think that there is usually a designation as to like kind of condition it is, but then in terms of what it impacts within you, yes, can be so wide and broad in terms of the impact. So I believe that migraines would be a physical disability, but I'm not actually sure. So I think like as long as we recognize, my key point there is that there are different types of disabilities, and we cannot forget about disabilities that are not apparent when you look at someone. So that's my most important point, because a lot of people focus heavily on physical disabilities, people who use mobility aids, and they are not really thinking about someone who has chronic illness, for example, or who has the one we just talked about, chronic migraines. That there's less awareness of these types of disabilities.
Absolutely. That's a great point. Okay, we have a question about recommendations for apps that create captions for places that don't have it, like YouTube, Instagram Live, etc. Like, is there, somebody had mentioned that there's a Chrome extension that kind of works. Do you know of any kind of extensions like that that help with captioning for those places that don't already offer it?
I want to shout out Erin Perkins. Hello, Erin. You have been doing the work in the comments. I saw you, and I appreciate you so much. Aaron and I are colleagues in this space. And yes, there is an extension on Google Chrome, and I'm using it right now. I am signed on to my phone. This is my phone right here, because my hearing aids are Bluetooth connected to my phone. So I'm wanting that quality audio. But there are no captions on this version, because I think I'm on Safari or something. But on Google Chrome on my laptop down here, I've got the extension up. Now, it really depends how clearly someone talks in terms of how this extension will perform. It's not the best auto captioning, but it's better than nothing. And what I like is that it basically, as long as you're in Google Chrome and if it detects audio, it will pop up. And you can decide whether to have it running or to close it out. Now, I have not seen any other tool that works as globally as that, except if you have a Pixel phone, a Google Pixel phone. Google has on there, I believe, that same functionality where it will pop up with auto captions when it hears video or audio running. So I don't know if that's on more Android devices. The Pixel is a little bit specialized in terms of it has some functionality that's only on the Pixel, and then there are some things that are on a broader base of phones. So let's see, any other workarounds? I think this is the one I use the most, and I'm sure there might be others that I don't know about. There's a website called like Web Captioner that people used to use often before we had a lot of captioning being integrated. So yeah, I think that's what's on top of my mind at the moment for that question. But we really need to see it be easier for people.
Yeah, absolutely. I have a question. So you had mentioned a couple of tools for getting transcripts of videos that you record. Can you tell me those again?
Yes, and I will put them. Oh, I don't think I can actually type in this comments area that we're on. Okay, so
Okay, I can add them. Tell me what they
oh,
are.
great. So I'll put it in the private chat for you to copy then.
Perfect. Perfect.
Those are two that I have used: Descript and Capwing. Coming to you. Gonna pop
There
up.
we go.
There you go.
Great. And let's see. I'm writing those down for myself. Another question. So when it comes to color contrast, is there one that is preferable, like white on black or black on white, or is it really just about having contrast?
Okay, so I will say for color contrast, prepare for it to get a little bit messy, because I have used faithfully a color contrast checker online. And what you do is, if you know the code of the color that you have, which say you're making a graphic in Canva, you can get the code for that color and you can put it into the checker. So I will just put those into the checker and see what it comes out with. And it will tell you whether that is accessible or not. And sometimes there's even a variation where if it's your graphic is on a smaller scale, not accessible. But if it's bigger, yes, accessible. So it gives you some detailed information. However, I posted about color contrast in a reel last month, and it was very interesting. Some people said that they did have an issue with certain types of high contrast that are supposed to be the way to do things. And they were explaining some issues with that. I think that one of the things that I remember was people saying that an all white background with black text on top of it was too bright, I think, for some of them. So, but then I think there's just a lot of variation in how people view the world. So there are best practices, but I'm really opening myself up to learning a little bit more about this as I got all this feedback from users. So I think it works for most people in terms of following what the color contrast guidelines say, but it may not work for everyone. And so it doesn't have to be black and white. you can do other color combos and they are going to pass the test.
Okay. Like I noticed for myself, like I prefer dark mode. Like I prefer the white, like the background is mostly black with the white instead of the other way around. Um, Also, can you share, do you have a link to that color contrast checker?
So it's in my ebook. I have the
Okay,
link in
perfect.
there. If I was to grab it now, I would have to go onto another screen and look for it. So it is in
And
there.
I wrote down the link for your ebook, so I'm going to share that. Um, it's your website free ebook, right?
Yes. So there are 3 E's in there.
And I'm like, hopefully I did that right, and that people can grab that and get the ebook,
Mm-hmm.
and then it will have all that information in there. And then
Yes.
one final question. How can we improve the working culture as many employees feel uncomfortable talking about disability so that that becomes a more normalized conversation?
Yeah. So how we can improve the working culture? Yes. I thank you for this question. The TEDx talk that I just did is about this. It's called Creating Inclusive Workplaces for All. And there is going to be what I want to challenge about this question is that it's saying many employees feel uncomfortable talking about disability. There is a valid reason why employees feel uncomfortable talking about disability. And it is not on the employee's responsibility to get more comfortable. It is the responsibility is on the employer to become more inclusive. And that is where I try to activate. And so I do my work doing engagements and trainings with companies so that they have these aha moments like, we haven't done anything for disability. We have all these employees we don't know about that are disabled, and we need to do something. And what is really important to me is that it is okay for employees to be as open or not as open about their disability as they would like to be, because everyone's on their own journey, everyone's situation is different. But if you do have an employer that is making it very easy to request an accommodation, making it very clear what the process is, if they include different, more inclusive ways to make hiring more friendly, like they've got captions on every single hiring interview, or they have other ways for you to show your talent through projects and actual tasks that you would do. Different. An employer shows that they've thought about these things, they're going to be creating more of a safe space for their employees. So I really challenge employers and managers to focus on disability inclusion. It is not a one training solution. It is really creating more awareness and best practices, starting everyone with disability awareness, because there also are so many microaggressions that happen in the workplace. When you have people casually using ableist language in the workplace, that really impacts others. And it's very similar to what we were talking about. So I've used an example before of someone saying, oh, I'm so OCD, I just cleaned my desk again. And you might have someone that is actually having OCD on your team, and that could be offensive to them or anyone with a mental health condition. It's just seeing that kind of language used in a light, casual way is so offensive. So I really think that what we can do is all raise awareness about disability and make it a priority within diversity work. And I'm doing my part, that other people are doing their part. And the TEDx talk that I gave is only 11 minutes long. And it can be that aha moment. That's what I want. I want it to be that aha moment for leaders and watching it, for anybody who's involved in workplace decision, to watch it and say, oh, wow, like it really is on us. And it doesn't have to be complicated to create a better workplace for disabled employees, because I give 3 simple examples of inclusion. So that's what I work on every day. It is my mission, and I want to see employees valued. I want disabled employees to be seen as the talented, creative powerhouses that we are.
I love that so much. And thank you for that. And I think you're right. Having employers step up and make a safe space, that's really where the responsibility lies. And for us as individuals, of course, being aware of how we're speaking about things and, using ableist language just very casually, which, I mean, guilty as charged, like I would be lying if I said I have never done that. I mean, I used to joke about my own ADHD before I got a diagnosis. I was like, oh, yeah, ADHD. Oh no, turns out that's a real thing. Okay, cool. But yeah, like I think that's a thing that a lot of us don't necessarily think about as we're going about our days. We have one final question. So for diverse images, do you have suggestions for how to include invisible disabilities?
Okay. Yeah, this is one that I wish that I had better suggestions for. When you're showing a static image, I see the question saying it's easier to do in video. Yes, it's easier to do if you are storytelling. But one thing you could do, if you're using an image description and you are authentically representing someone in the image who has a non-apparent disability, in the description, you could label them with their disability. And then at least in the text, you would be indicating that, okay, this is a person, this is an autistic employee, or this is whatever it is. Showing that in the image description is like one kind of way that I can think about. You can also look for images where someone might be, depending on what's appropriate, like wearing a t-shirt that kind of identifies themselves. Maybe like that's one way to communicate. Because I think what it's all about, what are you using the image for? What's your purpose? What's appropriate in that context? And how can you give that information to your audience? Whether that's a note on images that you want to do an overall note on all your images, like are the people represented in this images are 25% are disabled, this percentage of another group. Like I think there are different ways, and this is not my area of specialty, but I would love to see what other suggestions people have, because I think it's incredibly important to figure that out so we're not defaulting to only kind of representing disability in one way.
I like that. That's very helpful in thinking about how to be more inclusive, for invisible disabilities. So thank you. And that is all of the time that we have. Catarina, thank you so much for being here. This was so informative and just really helpful. And I hope that it helps all of us, think about the inclusivity in a new way. And so for those of you watching, don't forget to connect with Catarina. Go get that free ebook with all of those great resources. I am totally going to go get mine when we are done here. And thank you for being here, and we will see you in the wonderful portal or at the next event. So have a wonderful rest of your day, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you all. Thank you. Wonderful. It was such a pleasure to do this with you.